There's a city beneath a city in Turkey. It could hold something like 20,000 people. No windows, no sunlight, no daylight ever reached the lower floors. And the whole thing was carved by hand, over 1,000 years ago, with tools you could hold in one hand. That's not even the strangest thing on this list, because somewhere in here is a structure that engineers today still argue about, how it was built at all, without machines, without it collapsing on the people digging it. I'll show you which one when we get there. Watch for it. Number 10. Montreal. Underneath the city, there's a second one. Around 33 kilometers of connected tunnel, malls, offices, whole metro lines. An entire indoor civilization you never have to leave. And the reason it exists is brutally simple. Up on the surface, winter hits minus 30 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the street isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. So the city did what cities have always done when the outside turns hostile. It went in. It built downward, where the ground itself keeps the temperature steady. And that's the quiet theme of this whole list. Every single place on it was an answer to cold, to war, to heat, to fear. Something people simply couldn't live with up above. Number 9. Helsinki. The Finns carved a network of shelters straight into solid granite, built for war. Bomb shelters, deep in the bedrock, strong enough to take a direct hit. But here's the part one love. As someone who thinks about how buildings get used. On a normal Tuesday, none of them are shelters at all. There's swimming pools, hockey rinks, children's playgrounds. The same rock that's meant to survive the worst day in the country's history is, every other day, where kids go swimming after school. That's the clever part. They didn't build something and leave it waiting. They gave it a second life. War infrastructure, hiding in plain sight as everyday life. Number 8. The Cu Chi tunnels in Vietnam. Around 250 kilometers of tunnel, dug entirely by hand. Living quarters, kitchens, hospitals, command posts, all of it underground, all of it invisible from the surface. And this is the detail that genuinely stops me as an architect. Cooking underground should be impossible. The smoke gives you away instantly. So they solved it. They built long, angled channels that carried the smoke sideways through the earth and released it far away from the kitchen, and slowly, so it escaped as a thin haze instead of a column. Think about the problem solving in that. No ventilation engineer, no drawings, just an understanding of how air and smoke move through soil, worked out under fire, with nothing but shovels. That's not digging a hole. That's engineering, with almost nothing against everything. Number 7. Coober Pedy, Australia. Out here, the heat is the enemy. Surface temperatures that can crack a building and exhaust a body. So an entire town did the only sensible thing. It moved underground. Homes, a church, hotels, shops, all of it carved below the surface. And down there, the temperature barely moves all year. It stays mild, around the low 20s while the surface bakes far above it. Now here's why that matters to anyone who designs buildings. Keeping a stable indoor temperature is one of the hardest, most expensive problems we have. We throw insulation, air conditioning, and enormous amounts of energy at it. Coober Pedy solved the entire thing with a shovel, by letting the mass of the earth do the work for free. The ground is the best insulation there is. They just moved inside it. Number 6. London. For nearly 80 years, the city ran a secret railway under the streets. No passengers, no drivers, no staff down in the tunnels at all. Just mail, racing through the dark in small, driverless trains, decades before driverless was a word anyone used. And picture the layering of it, the way an architect sees a city in section. Up top, the pavement, millions of people walking to work, completely unaware. A few meters below their feet, in total darkness, the day's letters were flying across London faster than anything up on the congested surface could move. A whole hidden layer of the city doing its job in silence. Most of the people above it never knew it was there. Number 5. Petra. Now, this one bends the definition. Petra wasn't dug into the ground. It was carved out of a solid cliff face. And here's why that's harder than anything we've seen so far. They carved it top down, from the very top of the rock, working their way down. Think about what that actually means for the people doing it. There's no scaffolding rising up to meet a facade, because the facade doesn't exist yet. You're standing on the part you haven't carved, removing the stone beneath your own feet as you go. And there's no undo. With a built structure, you can take down a bad wall and lay it again. Here, every cut is permanent. One slip with the chisel, one misjudged line on a column or a pediment, and you can't add the stone back. The whole face is ruined. So what looks like decoration is really a single, continuous act of total commitment. From the first cut at the top, they had to see the entire finished building in their heads and not be wrong. Number 4. Beijing. Beneath the modern city is a Cold War ghost, around 30 square kilometers of tunnels and halls, built in secret to move an entire population underground if the worst ever happened. And the scale is the thing that's hard to hold in your head. This wasn't a shelter for a few 100 people. It was meant to take a city, shops, schools, hospitals, theaters, all planned out down there in the dark. As a designer, there's something genuinely haunting about that brief. You're asked to build at enormous cost and effort a complete second city, and to hope, every single day, that it never gets used. You're designing for a future you're praying never arrives. A whole metropolis, sitting empty under the living one, waiting for a day that, thankfully, never came. Number 3. Naours, in France. An underground refuge so old it's medieval, around 300 rooms, carved deep below a quiet village. For centuries it did one simple, brutal job. When armies came through and danger arrived, the whole village would vanish, down into the earth, and wait for it to pass. And then, much later, something extraordinary happened to it. During the First World War, soldiers rediscovered the tunnels. And like people always do, they left their mark. They carved their names, their units, their dates into the walls. So now you've got something no architect could ever design on purpose. Layers of human history, stacked physically in the dark. A medieval hiding place, with a wartime guest book scratched on top of it. The structure kept a record of everyone who ever needed it, a record nobody planned for. Number 2. Tokyo. Underneath the city sits something people have nicknamed the Underground Temple. A flood control chamber so vast it genuinely looks like a cathedral, row after row of enormous concrete pillars, around 18 meters tall, holding up a hall big enough to swallow a stadium whole. Its only job is to stop Tokyo from drowning. When the rivers swell past their limit, the water is diverted down here, into this immense empty space, instead of up into the streets and homes above. And here's what gets me about it. Almost no one is ever allowed inside. It was built to sit silent, dark, and completely empty for most of its life, a masterpiece of engineering with no audience, waiting for the one day it's desperately needed. We tend to think beautiful architecture is meant to be seen. This is the opposite. It's a cathedral built for water, and the highest compliment you can pay it is that it almost never has to work. And number 1. Back to where we started. Derinkuyu, 18 levels deep. Ventilation shafts that still, today, pull fresh air all the way, down to the lowest floor. Massive rolling stone doors, each one carved to seal a passage and designed so they could only be closed from the inside. Room for something like 20,000 people, plus their food, their water, even their livestock. Everything they'd need to disappear underground and survive down there for months. And here's the part one promised you at the start. The part engineers still argue about. We don't fully agree on who first began it, or how they cut this much rock, this precisely, this deep, without the whole thing collapsing on the people doing the digging. No steel, no power tools, no, structural calculations on paper, just an inherited, hard-won understanding of how stone behaves that, honestly, holds up against anything I'd specify today with a computer. That was the one. The structure modern engineering still can't entirely account for. And it was sitting under a quiet Turkish town the whole time. Here's what I keep coming back to. The best underground architecture was never meant to be admired. It was built to protect, to keep people safe, or fed, or hidden, or dry. Function first, with no thought of an audience. And that, I think, is exactly why it lasted. If you want to keep going down, I put together a breakdown of the actual engineering that kept these places standing, the ventilation, the load paths, the way they read the stone. It quietly changes how you look at every building above ground, too. It's the natural next step, if this pulled you in.